Something is cutting through our solar system right now that should not exist. Not by any law of physics we understand, not by any model we have ever built, not by any observation we have ever recorded across 4 million years of documented astronomy. 12 hours ago, NASA's Deep Space Network locked onto a signal so far outside the boundaries of known science that the engineers analyzing it ran their calculations twice, not because they doubted their equipment, but because they doubted what reality was telling them. The object has a name, 3I Atlas. And the more you learn about what it is doing, the harder it becomes to find a rational explanation for it. 3I Atlas is currently moving through the densest region of the Kuiper Belt at 87 kilometers per second. That speed alone is remarkable. But speed is not the reason every senior scientist at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory is staring at their screens in silence right now. The reason is this. It is doing so in a perfectly straight line. No collisions, no gravitational deflection, no loss of velocity, not even a fraction of a percent. In the entire recorded history of modern astrophysics, across every comet, asteroid, and rogue body ever tracked, nothing has ever done this. To truly grasp why that is extraordinary, you need to understand what the Kuiper Belt actually is. Imagine a vast, donut-shaped minefield stretching billions of kilometers beyond Neptune. It is packed with icy fragments, dwarf planets, and the frozen debris left over from the violent formation of our solar system. It is not a calm place. It is one of the most gravitationally turbulent regions we know of. Every single object that has ever passed through it, without exception, has been battered, deflected, slowed, or completely destroyed. That is not a theory. That is 4 million years of consistent, documented, repeatable observation. 3I Atlas ignored every single bit of it. Think of it this way. Picture firing a bullet through a forest wrecked by a hurricane. A bullet that never clips a single branch, never loses a single rotation, never slows by even a millimeter per second. Now take that image and scale it to 33 billion tons of mass, moving at 87 kilometers per second through 240 million kilometers of cosmic wreckage. The mathematical probability of a natural object doing this is 0.00001%. That is a 1 in 47 billion chance. That number did not come from a theoretical model or a back-of-the-envelope calculation. It came directly from NASA's own telemetry data. The object was first spotted on August 12, 2025. At that point, it was classified as an interstellar rogue comet entering our solar system from the direction of the Oort cloud. A strange visitor, perhaps, but not an unprecedented one. We had seen interstellar objects before. The classification seemed reasonable. But from the very first observations, something was wrong. Every comet we have ever tracked develops a coma as it approaches the sun, a glowing cloud of gas and dust that forms when solar radiation heats the surface. 3I Atlas produced nothing. No coma, no tail, no outgassing signature. Just a dark, silent, monolithic mass slicing through space with a precision that no frozen rock has any right to possess. The scientific community took note. And then April 14th, 2026 arrived, and everything changed. At exactly 3:14 UTC, 3I Atlas entered the Kuiper Belt scattering disk, the most violently chaotic subregion within an already chaotic zone. 3 completely independent observatories watched what happened next. NASA's James Webb Space Telescope, ESA's Gaia spacecraft, and the LMA Observatory in Chile. 3 different instruments, 3 different methodologies, 3 different countries. Every single one of them recorded the same result, the same velocity, the same trajectory, the same untouched, pristine path through more than 12,000 cataloged objects representing billions of tons of mass. One identical, impossible conclusion. And the world's top space agencies immediately began reassigning their senior teams. Before anyone allows imagination to run ahead of evidence, the scientific process has a clear directive: follow the data. So let us do exactly that. Because in this case, it is the data itself, cold, verified, cross-confirmed data, that makes this situation so deeply unsettling. NASA's Deep Space Network antenna, DSS-43, located in Canberra, Australia, locked onto 3I Atlas at 1842 UTC on April 14th. The engineers expected to see the standard behavior of any comet traversing the Kuiper belt: a tumbling, irregular mass gradually worn down by microscopic collisions with interstellar dust. What they actually recorded stopped the room cold. The object was not tumbling. Its rotational orientation was completely locked, not drifting, not wobbling, not responding to the gravitational influence of surrounding bodies the way every known celestial object does. For a 33 billion ton mass traveling at 87 kilometers per second through a debris field, that level of rotational stability is not merely unusual. It is physically indefensible under every model we currently possess. But the rotation was only the first anomaly. The list was just beginning. At 36 hours before the core Kuiper belt transit, something in the telemetry shifted. The object's rotation did not simply hold steady. It actively corrected itself. A minor degree of tumbling that had appeared in earlier observations simply stopped, as cleanly as if someone had flipped a switch. At the 24-hour mark before transit, the trajectory shifted by exactly 0.004 degrees. That sounds like a trivial number. It is not. When you are moving 33 billion tons at 87 kilometers per second, a 0.004 degree course adjustment demands an enormous expenditure of kinetic energy, the kind that, in any natural object, would come from outgassing jets, a gravitational slingshot, or solar radiation pressure. None of those forces were present. No thrust signature was detected. No nearby gravitational body could account for it. At that distance from the Sun, solar radiation pressure is effectively zero. 12 hours later, it corrected again, this time by 0.07 degrees. And when scientists plotted each of these micro-adjustments against the known positions of massive icy bodies in the object's path, the alignment was surgical. Every single correction corresponded exactly to the location of a known obstacle directly ahead. It was behaving as though it possessed a real-time, high-resolution map of the Kuiper belt and was actively using it to navigate. Here is how to picture that. Imagine driving blindfolded at 300 miles per hour through a completely full parking lot and never once making contact with a single vehicle. Not due to luck, because something was actively guiding you around every obstacle before you reached it. The Hubble Space Telescope's Wide Field Camera 3 added another layer to this picture. At 18 hours before its closest approach to the dwarf planet Haumea, 3I Atlas shifted its rotational axis by 0.12 degrees and, in doing so, aligned itself perfectly with the solar wind. It effectively reduced its own cross-sectional profile. It turned itself sideways to slip through a closing gap between two massive bodies. It made itself aerodynamically smaller to minimize resistance. That is not random behavior. That is deliberate optimization. When you assign hard probability figures to all of this, the numbers become staggering. The odds of a rogue comet maintaining stable rotation without tumbling sit at around 4.2%. The odds of a natural object accelerating without outgassing or a gravitational assist are 0.00001%. Multiply those probabilities together for a single object exhibiting both behaviors simultaneously while navigating the densest debris field in the solar system, and you arrive at 1 in 89 trillion. The director of the Center for Astrophysics at Harvard and Smithsonian stated publicly and officially that 3I Atlas's orbital parameters are, in their exact academic language, mathematically impossible for a natural body. When a scientist with 4 decades of experience cataloging trans-Neptunian objects uses those words in an official capacity, that is the moment to pay complete and undivided attention. By April 15, 2026, the situation had moved well beyond questions of orbital mechanics. The impossible course corrections were on record. The rotational stability had been independently verified 3 times. But as the data continued, streaming in from every instrument pointed at the outer solar system, a completely new category of anomaly emerged. One that took an already extraordinary situation and pushed it into territory that no existing framework in astrophysics is equipped to explain. The surface temperature of 3I Atlas dropped, not by a small, ambiguous margin that could be attributed to sensor variance or calibration drift. At a point in its trajectory where friction with interstellar dust and microscopic debris should have been generating at least minor heat signatures along its leading edge, the surface temperature instead fell to 2.4 Kelvin. That is barely above absolute zero, the theoretical threshold at which all molecular motion stops. At that temperature, 3I Atlas was not merely cold. It was functionally invisible to most infrared detection systems, blending seamlessly into the cosmic microwave background radiation that fills all of deep space. The reason this is so profoundly strange comes down to basic thermodynamics. Any object moving at 87 kilometers per second through space, no matter how sparse the medium, accumulates thermal energy from constant micro-impacts with gas molecules and dust particles. Even in near-vacuum conditions, a fast-moving object's leading surface picks up heat. This is not a theoretical prediction. It is an experimentally confirmed physical principle, tested and verified in every environment we have ever studied. 3I Atlas was not radiating heat outward. It was absorbing incoming energy and either converting it into something undetectable or suppressing it entirely through a process we have no name for. Then the temperature dropped again. By the time the object reached 2 hours before the inner Kuiper belt boundary, NASA's instruments were reading 1.8 Kelvin. A 33 billion ton mass was actively growing colder while simultaneously accelerating through a debris field. It was not behaving like matter. It was behaving like a thermal management system, a controlled, self-regulating mechanism designed to maintain specific internal conditions regardless of external input. At the 10-hour mark before inner belt transit, a new signal appeared in the Deep Space Network telemetry that no one had anticipated, a sharp spike in localized electromagnetic activity originating from within the object itself, not from a nearby planetary body, not from a solar event, from 3I Atlas directly. 6 hours later, the electromagnetic pattern shifted again. A thermal inversion occurred across the object's entire surface. The leading edge, which in any natural moving body should be the warmest due to debris contact, was now the coldest portion of the surface, colder even than the trailing face. None of the existing models predicted this. None of them can explain it retroactively either. What this implies about the object's internal structure is the part that no scientist working on this case can dismiss. For an object to actively regulate its own thermal output, to cool itself while accelerating, to invert its surface temperature distribution, to maintain a near absolute zero core while simultaneously generating localized electromagnetic activity. Something inside must be responsible, something producing controlled, purposeful output, something operating on a specific agenda. NASA's Wide Field Infrared Survey Explorer confirmed the next piece at 9:22 UTC on April 15th. 3I Atlas had not maintained its velocity. It had increased it by 1.4 kilometers per second, a spontaneous, unprompted acceleration with no gravitational slingshot, no outgassing thrust, and no external force of any measurable kind. This was independently confirmed by ESA's tracking network, the ALMA array in Chile, and the Keck Observatory in Hawaii. Isaac Newton's first law states that an object in motion continues at the same velocity unless acted upon by an outside force. No outside force acted here, yet the speed increased. By every tool available to modern science, that is impossible. Everything recorded up to this point was already enough to trigger emergency briefings across 2 continents. But on April 15th, 2026, at exactly 11:47 UTC, the ALMA array in Chile detected something that reframed the entire event, something that none of the preceding anomalies had prepared any of the observing teams for. 3I Atlas emitted a coherent, directed electromagnetic pulse, aimed precisely along its own flight path. Take a moment with that. A supposedly frozen rogue comet, composed of primordial ice and silicate dust, projected a focused electromagnetic signal directly ahead of its trajectory, not a diffuse burst of radiation, not a random discharge caused by interaction with the solar wind. A coherent, directed pulse, the specific type of structured signal that, in every other context in physics, indicates the presence of a transmitter, a mechanism, an intentional source. NASA's Deep Space Network confirmed the detection within hours. What the instruments captured was not a single burst. It was a continuous output pulsing at exact 23-second intervals, generating 1.2 terawatts of electromagnetic energy and projecting it across a precisely defined radius of 4.12 kilometers directly ahead of the object. The effect was immediate and measurable. Microscopic ice debris and dust particles that would ordinarily have impacted the leading surface of 3I Atlas were instead deflected, pushed aside before any physical contact occurred. 3I Atlas was projecting a shield around itself. ESA's Gaia spacecraft independently verified the magnetic signature within 45 minutes of LMA's initial detection. The numbers were identical. The field geometry was identical. The pulse interval was identical. And within 45 minutes of that confirmation, the European Space Agency did something that has almost never happened in 4 decades of modern astronomy. It initiated a full code-red data classification protocol and immediately recalled its senior orbital mechanics team to headquarters in Darmstadt, Germany. No public statement. No press release. Just a quiet, rapid institutional response from an organization that had clearly encountered data it was not yet prepared to discuss openly. Let us apply the most charitable scientific interpretation possible and work through the scenarios. In the first scenario, 3I Atlas has a highly magnetized primordial core, an unusual but not entirely impossible geological formation. If that holds, then we have just discovered a completely new state of astrophysical matter capable of generating terawatts of electromagnetic power without producing any measurable thermal output. That discovery alone would force a fundamental rewrite of planetary accretion theory and deep space material science. In the second scenario, this is an exotic quantum entanglement effect interacting with the solar wind in some previously undocumented way. If that explanation is correct, then the entire framework of deep space electrodynamics is built on incomplete foundations and must be reconstructed from the ground up. The third scenario requires no diplomatic softening to state plainly. If that electromagnetic field is an actively engineered deflector system, a mechanism deliberately designed to protect a structured object while it navigates a debris field, then we are not observing a comet. We are observing architecture. A constructed object measuring 18.4 kilometers across, operating an internal power system at near absolute zero temperatures, projecting a precision-calibrated electromagnetic barrier at 1.2 terawatts, and navigating the Kuiper belt as though it has traveled this region before and knows exactly where every obstacle lies. The senior director of the Center for Astrophysics at Harvard and Smithsonian stated on the record that this object's orbital parameters are mathematically impossible for anything natural. The consensus among the world's leading orbital mechanics specialists has moved past quiet skepticism. It is now open, urgent, and institutional. ESA has been fully briefed. NASA has escalated to a Level 4 observational protocol, a classification triggered only a handful of times across 4 decades of modern space observation. And the object is still moving, still accelerating, still cooling, still pulsing, toward Neptune. At this point, 5 distinct, independently verified anomalies are on the official scientific record. Precision matters here, so let us be exact. These are not theories, not projections, not speculative readings from a single instrument on a bad night. These are fully documented, multi-source, cross-verified observational facts captured by some of the most sophisticated scientific instruments our civilization has ever constructed. Anomaly 1. 3I Atlas traversed 240 million kilometers of the Kuiper belt's densest debris zone without registering a single microperturbation, a 1 in 89 trillion probability of natural occurrence. Anomaly 2. The object executed 2 separate, precisely calculated course corrections with no detectable external force, each aligning exactly with a known obstacle in its path. Anomaly 3. Its surface temperature actively decreased to 1.8 Kelvin, colder than the ambient deep space environment in that region, while simultaneously accelerating through a debris field with a complete thermal inversion across its surface. Anomaly 4. It spontaneously increased velocity by 1.4 kilometers per second, confirmed 3 times by 3 independent observatories, with no gravitational assist, no outgassing, and no external force of any kind. Anomaly 5. It emitted a continuous, coherent electromagnetic pulse at 23-second intervals, generating 1.2 terawatts and projecting a precisely defined deflector field 4.12 kilometers ahead of its path. 5 anomalies, all documented, all confirmed, all physically impossible under every model currently accepted by modern science. Now consider one question that NASA's classified emergency briefing at JPL has been carefully and conspicuously avoiding. How does a frozen mass of primordial ice generate a continuous 1.2 terawatt electromagnetic field while maintaining a core temperature just fractions above absolute zero? These two physical states are not merely unusual in combination. They are mutually exclusive under every thermodynamic principle we accept. Generating 1.2 terawatts of electromagnetic power produces heat. That is not a principle with exceptions. That is a law. Yet 3I Atlas is generating that power output and simultaneously becoming colder. Those two facts cannot coexist in any natural object we have ever studied. There are only 3 possible explanations, and none of them are comfortable. If this is a quantum interaction with undiscovered trans-Neptunian magnetic structures, then the entire theoretical foundation of planetary accretion, the model explaining how solar systems form and evolve, is catastrophically incomplete. Every physics and astronomy textbook in every university on the planet would need revision. If this represents a new form of dark matter manipulation, then modern astrophysics must be rebuilt from first principles, with the equations governing gravity, inertia, thermodynamics, and electromagnetism all subject to fundamental reevaluation. And if 3I Atlas is a constructed object, an active, self-navigating structure deliberately transiting our solar system, then the consequences extend far beyond the domain of science. They reach into the deepest question our civilization has ever confronted. We would no longer be the most sophisticated intelligence operating in this region of space. We would be standing face to face with the immediate and undeniable reality that something else, something capable of engineering a 33 billion ton structure, operating it at near absolute zero, and navigating it through a debris field with sub-degree precision, had chosen to enter our solar system, intentionally. There is no comfortable middle ground between those 3 possibilities. One of them is real. The evidence does not yet point with certainty toward any single explanation, but it has completely eliminated the comfortable assumption that this is simply an unusual comet. That explanation collapsed under the weight of verified data days ago. What remains is the extraordinary, and the extraordinary demands extraordinary scrutiny. The James Webb Space Telescope's NIRCam instrument has been collecting new data every single hour. In exactly 48 hours from the moment this analysis was compiled, 3I Atlas will cross the orbital path of Neptune, formally entering the inner solar system for the first time. Every major space telescope with an available observational window is currently trained on the outer Kuiper belt. The Deep Space Network is running continuous telemetry streams around the clock. The ALEMA Array, the Keck Observatory, and ESA's Gaia are all locked onto a single target, and every passing hour is delivering new data that compounds rather than resolves the central mystery. The electromagnetic signal is not fading. It is intensifying. With each hour, the pulse output is measurably stronger, and the precision of its field geometry is growing tighter. That pattern, an intensifying, focusing signal, is the exact opposite of what you would expect from a decaying natural phenomenon. A magnetized comet losing energy would produce a weakening, diffusing field over time. 3I Atlas is doing the reverse. Whatever is generating that signal appears to be powering up, not winding down. It is building towards something. The object currently sits 210 million kilometers from Earth's orbital path. Its confirmed velocity stands at 89.03 kilometers per second. Its core temperature continues to register below 2 Kelvin. Its trajectory, verified by 3 independent sources, remains on a mathematically precise path that defies every model of natural orbital dynamics currently in existence. Several things deserve to be stated plainly at this stage. The institutional response has been both significant and rapid. ESA's Emergency Planetary Defense Coordination Office received a formal briefing at 14 o'clock UTC on April 15th. NASA escalated to Level 4 observational protocol, a classification reserved for events with no precedent in the modern astronomical record. These are not bureaucratic formalities. These are the actions of organizations that have encountered data they cannot categorize and are responding with every resource at their disposal. The scientific community is not panicking, but it is not dismissing this either. The most senior researchers in orbital mechanics, astrophysics, and deep space electrodynamics are all engaged. Peer review processes that ordinarily span months are being compressed into days. Data that would normally flow through standard public publication channels is instead being routed through classified briefing structures first. These institutional behaviors are not signs of deception. They are signs of seriousness, of genuine, high-level uncertainty about something that should, based on all prior experience, have a simple natural explanation. It does not. What is unfolding in real time is one of three things: a natural phenomenon so far beyond our observational record that it forces a complete revision of fundamental physics, a new category of deep space matter or energy interaction that modern science has not yet characterized, or the single most significant event in the history of human civilization. Proximity with, or the first signal from, something that did not originate here and is operating with a level of control and precision that surpasses anything our species has ever built or seriously imagined building. The instruments are live. The data is streaming. 3i Atlas is drawing closer with every passing hour, and its signal is growing stronger. Whatever occurs in the next 48 hours, as this object crosses Neptune's orbit and formally enters the planetary zone of our solar system, will either begin to unravel this mystery or deepen it in ways none of us can yet anticipate. This is the most consequential